You know, we've all seen it in the movies, right? These tiny little machines swimming through our bodies, fighting off diseases. It's always felt like pure science fiction. Well, not anymore. A recent breakthrough has officially turned that sci-fi into sci-fact. So let's just get right into it. This is the incredible new world of microscopic robots. So let's just start with the headline facts, because they are absolutely staggering. We are talking about fully autonomous, programmable robots that are smaller than a single grain of salt. And here's the kicker. They can be mass-produced for about a penny apiece. This is not some small step forward. This is a giant leap into a whole new world. Okay, so the question you've got to be asking is, how on earth did they finally do it? I mean, the best minds in the field have been banging their heads against this wall for nearly half a century, running into the same fundamental problems over and over. So what changed? What did they figure out? To really get the breakthrough, you first have to understand the wall, the massive obstacle they were all up against. See, it turns out you can't just shrink a robot by making all the parts smaller. The moment you enter the micro world, the fundamental rules of physics as we know them, well, they totally change. Think about it like this. In our world, the world we live in, inertia is king. You throw a ball and it keeps going, right? But down at the microscopic scale, that force basically becomes meaningless. Instead, another force, viscosity, which is just the stickiness of a fluid, becomes this overwhelming dominant force. For a tiny robot, the world feels like a thick, syrupy, sticky place. And this quote from the lead researcher, Mark Miskin, just says it all perfectly. He said, "If you're small enough, pushing on water is like pushing through tar." Just try to imagine that for a second. Trying to swim through tar? That's the challenge a microscopic robot faces in something as simple as water. All of its energy just gets instantly sucked away. And that's exactly why all the old ideas failed. You can't just slap a tiny propeller on it. That thing would be useless against the tar. And trying to build tiny moving legs or arms, well, not only are they ridiculously fragile, they're also next to impossible to actually build. The entire playbook for robotics had to be thrown right out the window. So, how do you solve a problem that seems impossible? Well, you stop playing by the old rules and you make new ones. The first huge breakthrough is to stop fighting the physics of the microworld and instead start using them. They had to figure out a way to move with no moving parts at all. And the solution they came up with is this brilliant concept called electrokinetics. This is really the heart of their genius. Instead of building a robot that pushes its way through the fluid, they designed a robot that makes the fluid itself do all the moving. It's a total 180-degree shift in thinking. So here's the simple version of how it works. First, little actuators on the robot create a tiny electrical field right around it. Second, that field starts pulling on charged ions that are just naturally floating around in the fluid. And finally, as those ions start to move, they drag the water molecules with them. This creates a tiny current, a little river that just carries the robot along for the ride. Mark Miskin has another perfect way to picture this. It's like the robot creates its own personal, moving river and then just floats along in the current. It's not swimming through the tar anymore. It's making the tar itself flow. I mean, what an incredibly clever way to just completely sidestep the problem of viscosity. And you know, this design has a fantastic side effect because there are no fragile, moving parts to break, no propellers, no gears. These little bots are unbelievably tough. You can literally suck them up into a tiny tube, squirt them out, and they're perfectly fine. They're basically solid-state swimmers. Okay, so they figured out movement. That is a massive deal, but it's only half the battle. For a robot to be truly autonomous, it needs a brain, right? An onboard computer so it can sense the world and make its own decisions. And that brain needs power, which at this scale is practically non-existent. So just how little power are we talking about here? Well, the teeny tiny solar cells on the robot's back generate a grand total of 75 nanowatts. That's not microwatts, not milliwatts. Nanowatts. That is a completely absurd, almost impossibly small amount of energy to run a computer on. To really put that number into perspective, just look at this. A smartwatch, which we all think of as a pretty low-power device, uses over 100,000 times more power than this robot. A smartphone? It uses over 1 billion nanowatts. The engineers here were working with an energy budget that's basically a rounding error for any modern piece of electronics. So the engineering team had to basically perform miracles of efficiency. I mean, they redesigned circuits from the ground up to run on unbelievably low voltages. They invented a whole new machine language from scratch just so they could cram complex commands into single instructions to save power. The entire program for the robot had to fit into a memory of just a few hundred bits. It's just a masterclass in minimalist engineering. So they solved movement, and they solved the brain. What does all this mean for the future? Well, this was never just about creating one tiny robot. It's about unleashing armies of them. We are standing right now at the dawn of what you could call microswarms. And here is the final crucial piece of the puzzle that makes this whole thing so revolutionary. The robots are made of silicon, and that means they can be built using the exact same process we use to make computer chips. This isn't some handcrafted, one-off device. It was designed for mass production from day one. And when I say mass production, I really mean it. The researchers can fit over 100 of these complete autonomous robots onto a single silicon wafer. They aren't building them one by one. They're essentially printing them by the hundreds. Which brings us to maybe the most mind-blowing number of all. Because they can be made so cheaply and so efficiently, the estimated cost for one of these incredible little microrobots is just 1 cent. A penny. And all of a sudden, you're not imagining deploying one robot, you're imagining deploying millions of them. And that really leaves us with the big, exciting question. This isn't just a new gadget, it's a foundational technology, a whole new tool for science and for medicine. So when you can deploy swarms of microscopic sensors and actors that cost next to nothing, what kinds of problems can we finally solve? What new worlds, both inside our bodies and out in the environment, will they let us explore? That sci-fi future, well, it just got a whole lot closer.